Yeah, Tuesday definitely. But
Tuesday definitely. Monday and Tuesday were absolutely gorgeous. To be fair.
On Monday, I was looking at rhinos and giraffes and all sorts in the Cotswold Wildlife Park.
Okay, so let's get ourselves ready to go here again. We are ready to go. So we are now live on YouTube, and we will start recording now, and we can go. So good morning, everyone. Once again, welcome to our weekly broadcast. Thursday, 10 a.m. seems to keep coming around quicker and quicker and quicker. I don't know if that's a sign that I'm very busy or a sign of old age. Not sure if my co-host, Mr. John Corey, has a view on that, but it may perhaps the latter.
A view? No, nothing to say so far.
Very good, very good. And today, absolutely delighted to be joined by someone who I think is becoming a little bit of a celebrity on our podcasts or our broadcasts and project webinars. Susie Jenkins. Good morning, Susie. Welcome once again.
Morning, David. Nice to be here.
I think I can say back by popular demand is perhaps the appropriate introduction. So we'll be hearing from you just in a few minutes, Susie, on our special topic today of how to deal with planners. So that's going to be interesting. I can't wait to get into that. So as most attendees know, in case there are any new ones today, my name is David Johnson. I'm the CEO of LEOcrowdfunding. We are an equity property crowdfunding platform. And my co-host is Mr. John Corey. He runs the Property Fortress, a monthly meet in London, one of the oldest monthly meets in London. So good morning, John. Welcome once again to the broadcast.
Good morning, good morning. And just so everybody knows, I have a possible call during our session from the NHS. And it's one of those where you either take it or lose your slot. So I'll have to take the call if it does come. Funny though, they said, hey, we could be up to an hour late. It's like, okay.
Yeah. Is that a US citizen criticizing the NHS for being an hour late when you're availing yourself of our wonderful NHS service?
No, this is an American living in London, but the idea that they're saying up front that, you need to be prepared at 10 past the hour, but don't be surprised if we're not there until up to an hour later. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
It's like waiting for the utility guy or the appliance repairman coming out somewhere between the morning and the evening.
Yeah.
I have a better one. I have a better one, which was HMRC, who told me to stay by the phone for a month.
Yeah, that would be slightly challenging. Definitely would. Yeah. Okay, so let's get into a couple of brief updates, and then we're getting straight into our topic today with Susie. So for those of you that are interested in the Barn Hill Planning Uplift project, we launched this just on a Thursday past. It's raced all the way to 70,500 from 21 investors over just a couple of days. Now, the intention is that this will close on Tuesday, the 8th at 5 p.m. So it's a short raise that Hitesh and Ray from Creation Tech 99 have opened this up for. So this will close, or it's intended to close at 5 p.m. It'll be next Tuesday, the 8th. So if you're having a look at this one and you haven't made up your mind, and do your research, do due diligence, and then make your decision if you want to invest. The minimum is 100,000. So we're well on our way there. Now we're also running a project webinar just to wrap up and make sure all the questions get answered and people have an opportunity to see the information. And that's next Monday at 7 p.m. So Hitesh and Ray will join us, do a 40-minute webinar just to make sure everyone is satisfied with the information and a chance to ask them any questions before investors choose to make an investment. So there's the link. You can snip that, screenshot it. But John, this certainly very pleased how this went off from a standing start, sort of 70,500 already is good traction.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a typical raise, for anyone who's thinking of raising money or investors who are investing, this is more or less to plan. They are a client, it's disclosed in the document, but it's always good to see a wide number of investors. It's always good to see some initial movement and then progressive movement afterwards. So if you're going to raise money, this is more or less the flow. And we'll see if there's any more questions on the webinar, but there's definitely been active in the activity in the forum. People have posted questions there, which is quite good. And so if people do have questions about that raise, go to the forum. If people have questions about today, use the Q&A, and you can actually see it's easier for us to manage and keep track of the questions, whether we've answered them or not. So.
Yep. Okay. Thanks for that. So again, come in Monday night if you want the webinar. Tuesday 5 p.m. This raise will close. We actually held a private webinar last night for the existing investors in Citygate House in Leicester. This was a project that we had raised 422,000 of pledged funds back in early March. And then just there were a number of factors came together. The fundraiser decided to source alternative funds to complete the purchase, and now he's coming back to the crowd to complete the crowdfunding raise so that he can replace the funds that he raised alternatively to allow him to complete. So we had a good webinar last night, and you can stay tuned for this over the next near future. This will go live for investment again on the platform, but really excited by this one. Really good project, 56 apartments, a commercial to resi refurb from a very, very experienced developer. And you can keep an eye on this if this interests you. Again, we'll be live once again on Clubhouse today at 11 a.m. Myself and John and our COO, Tony Ulner, and we'll have just discussions, all things property and property crowdfunding. These have been really interesting, such a wide variety of people, John, come on these, from experienced to absolute newbies in property. So there's been some really informative discussions in recent weeks on our Clubhouse.
Yes, one of the beauties of Clubhouse is you can talk direct, and so you get quite a range of people, and then conversations go off in all kinds of directions. And there are some actual famous or significant people that come out on Clubhouse conversations. So it's always interesting who you run into.
Yeah. So we're on there again, 11 a.m. today. We run for like 40, 45 minutes of a discussion. So if you're on Clubhouse, if you need an invite, contact myself or John. We probably have a couple of spare invites, and happy to get you on there and join and participate in the conversation.
I think I ought to do that. I ought to do that, David. I ought to have one of your invites.
I will get you an invite as part of being on our as a guest today. Once again, I will make sure you get an invite, Susie, after this. So I'm delighted once again to welcome Susie. As John said, any questions that arise, during the broadcast, get them into the Q&A. John and myself can pick them up, and very often a question been asked, leads to what I sometimes call the unpeeling of the onion. So don't be afraid to ask questions. We want people to participate. If you're experienced in this area of dealing with planners, then by all means contribute. And if you have a question for Susie, get it up there, and we can get it asked, and it'll benefit everyone then. So Susie, over to you to give yourself an introduction, your background, how you end up in property, and then we'll get into a market update first of all, and then into your topic for today.
Thanks, David. I fell into building as an alternative career. I wanted to be a vet originally, but it is something that I love, and initially trained as a bricklayer. Decided that winter work was a little bit sketchy, so became a carpenter joiner, and that means then you can work all year round. But the roof is my favourite place on a site, so I had to train to do that too. I went up through the management roles because that was also my degree, so it was a logical pathway. And as we started doing more complicated and bigger projects, it made sense for me to take on a more managerial role. So I have worked on everything from the tiny to the exceptionally large, and also in Europe, not just over here in England. I think that, and have dealt with planners of all shapes and sizes and various complications. I became a bit of a go-to for planning conditions that were awkward. So you're on mute, David.
Well spotted. Well spotted. I've always sort of loved hearing sort of how you ended up sort of pivoting into into actual property, which is always an interesting story. And I can just picture you sort of up on roofs doing roofing and bricklaying and all of that. So it's given you a real good experience, Susie, of, if you like, that side of construction and development. We're actually helping a bricklayer, you're helping a joiner, you're helping a roofer. You've known what it is, the early mornings, the late nights, doing all those jobs. And how have you found that's benefited then when you moved into things like planning and project management? It must have been a really good for the basis for you.
It was, because there are a lot of project managers who are degree qualified or college qualified, but have absolutely no site experience. And if you don't know how a site works and the challenges of the team on site, how can you properly plan a project? Because you're missing all of the little intricacies. For example, plumbers like the whole place to themselves, electricians, the same. And who will get on with who, so you can put in the building together, who doesn't get on with anybody else, and who needs time to do their job and can't be rushed or it will go wrong. And what I found with a lot of the project managers I've worked with as a site manager, because they don't understand this sort of thing, and they don't understand the logical sequence of the build, they miss things in the drawings, and they miss opportunities to put people into the site together, but also put the wrong people in, and it all goes a bit pear-shaped.
So that's a really good point on that. So let's deal with the market update first, overview, and then we'll get into this. So John may well be contained on his other call, which is absolutely fine. The topic, Susie, that I had or Josh in the office had chosen for today was just the fact that so much of the press in the last couple of days, last 48 hours, has been around this 10.9% surge in UK house prices. So it didn't matter whether you went to the Financial Times, the Guardian, the BBC, they're all talking about this 10.9% surge in house prices. So I mean, listen, you're in the property game. It's absolutely remarkable what's happening in the market currently, and even just trying to read the market. So even from a high level, I mean, how have you tried to analyze the market, say, in this last sort of 7-8 months, sort of post the initial impact of COVID?
Well, I'm quite pleased to see that my prediction appears to be coming true, because I based the whole design of my current project around the fact that I thought people, having been locked in their houses, would want a different kind of house. And the market seems to be proving that. Down here in Devon, it is absolutely unbelievable. And I think a large part of the 10.9 is from down here. People are buying with FaceTime viewings. Even the rental market, there are no homes available. There was a article in the press in Cornwall, and they were saying over all of Cornwall there were 63 properties available for rent. That was it.
And the whole of Cornwall.
The whole of Cornwall, yeah. And like I say, people are buying on FaceTime, but the knock-on effect of that is that the people who live and work down here can't actually find anywhere to live, to do their jobs, to support the people who are moving here, and the tourist industry has gone nuts. I went north on Saturday morning, went up to Gloucester, and the motorway was solid from Oakhampton to Stroud. And when I say solid, it was more of a car park than an actual motorway, which again is that was all going south. So that will be driving a massive surge for countryside, I think. And
the big question is, how sustainable is it? And obviously nobody knows.
Exactly.
But certainly right now, certainly if you're in those areas and happen to own a property in the rental market, or you're trying to sell a property, then now is certainly a good time to be trying to do that, for sure.
Yeah, you're laughing, but then there's the standard thing of stocks and shares, isn't it? When do you get out? Do you hang in there because all the properties are selling, so therefore it's becoming a limited market, so you're worth even more? But at what point do you say, okay, it's about to bottom, I'll get out now? That's the judgment call.
It's very, very interesting, and that brings us on, I suppose, to our topic for today, which is dealing with planners. So we've obviously set this up. It's not about like planning uplift deals in general. We want to really get into, in your experience, because you've obviously dealt with so many different planning projects in the past. And what we want to really deep dive into today, Susie, is this, like, how do you introduce yourself to the planners on that first call? What research do you do leading up to that, the site visits, etc. So we'll get into that in a second. What I will do is just lead into that with the fact that your old Wool and Mill project, which successfully funded on our site, we are due to close that off today. There was a slight delay in a couple of investor funds coming in. It's probably going to end up at around about 111,000 that you raised on the platform. The minimum was 65, so we're well over the minimum. And this is a projected return of 50% per annum. You're expecting planning in 1 year. If it does go to appeal, it might be 2 years. But you've been very generous with the potential projected returns to the investors. But you want to just give a quick sort of 30-second update? I know there is an investor update that you've planned, which will go out in detail to the investors. Obviously, they should get the information first, but just even high level, any sort of progress from where we were a few weeks ago?
Yeah, and obviously all my investors will be getting their welcome message, and this was day one, but since day one, we've moved forward considerably. I've actually been working on the phase one the last couple of weeks, because although the current owners are doing the phase one planning, it's very, very intertwined with what I'm doing with phase two. And I had a site visit with the historical chappie, the conservation officer, last week, just to try to talk through essentially concerns, because it is a listed building. Phase one is a listed building. And as we will talk about later, all of this sort of thing is very important when you're doing a planning project. Things are all interlinked. And if you're trying to do something in a street that is very different from everything else in the street, you need to make sure that what you're doing is what is wanted, or don't even go there.
Yeah.
So this was what I was,
Absolutely.
this was the point of my meeting. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, we'll look forward to getting the investor update. And I think the end of June will be the first webinar update for the investors. So let's get into the topic for today, because this is what is beneficial to the audience. Just some people who are involved in planning at any level or any stage or thinking about it. We want to give some ideas. So you've identified a bit of land. You're thinking, I want to go for planning on it. What's your first interaction with the planners? How does that look? Is it by email? Is it face-to-face meeting, or how do you start that process off?
No, I start that process with research. I look at what has gained approval in the area, what is wanted, what's in the neighbourhood plan, what do they actually need? Am I going to be meeting a need or doing what is wanted? Sometimes they're not the same. Sometimes there is a real need for certain things in an area, but the NIMBYs don't want it. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't build it, because if it's needed, it should be done. But that can make your life a little bit difficult. So you need to make sure that you have all of the facts at your fingertips. And I do that before I speak to the planners, because one of the most important things in that first conversation, ideally, it's a conversation where you have your facts at your fingertips, so you're not wasting their time, and they know you're serious. They know that you know your stuff. You're not going to mess them about. You're not going to send something speculative in. They have a lot of challenge. Everybody is quite critical. I've seen a lot of stuff on LinkedIn lately, people criticizing the planners, but sometimes they have to, the historical buildings officer was telling me the other day that he gets sent things that are absolutely irrelevant to him, but he still has to sign them off and deal with them, because for some reason in the planning application they've ticked a box. And so from the outset, make sure that what you're doing is right and not wasting their time, because they appreciate that, and it does give you a reputation then for future work. If this is the one and only you're going to be doing in an area, then it's not quite as important, but you still have to deal with them for several weeks. And you want them to not look at yours and say, oh no, not them again. You want them to look at yours and say, oh, okay, I'll phone them, because they'll sort that out.
Yeah. So just to sort of really break that down. So when you say you do your research, where do you access information? How do you access information?
Well, neighbourhood plan is a public document. And the planning portal is fascinating because you can use that for all sorts of things. The third title is Know Your Own Project, including the planning history. Well, if you if you search your postcode on the planning portal, you can see what everybody else around that particular postcode has done. So it gives you an idea of what they do like, what they don't like. It can also help you find an architect that they like, because if a particular architect has had a lot of success, I would approach them because they know what the planners want and how to deal with the planners. And that can be incredibly helpful because they've already established a relationship. The planning portal is an absolute mine of information, but so is Google Earth. You can actually, if you look at a satellite image and see what's what, see whether what you're trying to do is going to make it not right for the area or will fit in with the area. What is their public transport strategy? Do you need car parking spaces or do they not want them? Because sometimes just by thinking that you're being helpful putting car parking in, they actually don't want cars in that area. So that will get you a, no, I don't want you to do this from the planners. So your research needs to be broader than just what can I put on the plot? It's what is the whole ethos for the area? What is their plan? Which again, most of that you can find in the neighbourhood plan.
I like that idea of want versus need, and how they may not be aligned. That's interesting. So when it comes then to a project that you're working on, and I know you've done your own planning projects, you've worked as a project manager for other people on that. So when it comes to assessing like the particular plot, is there anything else that you would look for? I mean, obviously you've talked about what else has been approved recently. What are the needs and wants? I mean, what are some of the pitfalls you should be looking for? So the average, I don't use the word amateur, but say the non-professional, who maybe wants to start getting into planning and they see this plot somewhere on the surface, it looks great. What pitfalls are you looking for? Just to say this mightn't even be a goer from day one.
Some of the ones that I've recently worked for one of the top tier developers. I did a short-term project for them, and I was astounded that they haven't done their land survey. So they're in the process of building several thousand houses on a different site from where I was. But they've got to a point where they're doing their particular build, and they've just found that there's a cave system underneath where they're building 4 meters deep. So when they were trying to pile it, and the piling drill disappeared. It just dropped. Now, I was absolutely astounded because I would start by looking at what land have I got. I've also consulted on a property where they were on top of an aquifer, which provided drinking water in the Cotswolds, but it had carcinogens that were water soluble, and nobody picked that up. So they came to me saying, well, how do we deal with this? What do we do? And in looking through the details of their drawings, etc., they also wanted to pile the foundation. I said, well, you can't pile on limestone without taking remedial action for the fact that it's full of cracks. So again, if they'd started by having a proper look at what the land was, what the soil was, what the contaminants were, that would save them time and money. And the planners want it anyway, but I do that before I even negotiate to buy, because you can really, really have a nasty shock if you haven't done that. And how do we know? It's a pretty green field.
What's the cost of that? So again, I'm sure some people who are looking at it, especially if they want to do an uplift planning, they don't really want to build, they're just looking to make their money by finding, getting planning and then selling. So they want to keep their costs down. I mean, what is the extra cost involved in doing some of the searches you're talking about?
Well, a geological survey, you can tend to do as a desktop, which will give you an idea of whether you were, for example, on the limestone. That's a couple of £100. If you want to do a full, there's all sorts of other things included if you do a proper land survey, percolation, for example, to know whether you're going to have issues with the flood report or the rainwater. But that's a few thousand. But it all depends on the size of your site. But the costs, most of it you can do for a few hundred. And if you're just doing I want to get planning on the site and sell it, it is something quite likely that the developer will want. If they've done their homework and they are experienced, they'll want to know, like me, it is something I would want. So it is worth doing. And it's part of the planning. So either you do it and there isn't a condition attached to the planning, which then makes your project more saleable, or you don't do it and you run the risk that actually there is something there hidden and it's a condition on the planning, and whoever wants to buy it, it'll come out anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So what is your first interaction with the planner, the decision maker, if you like, that the person that you need to say yes to your application? What's your first interaction with them? By email, face to face, or how do you do that?
Everything has changed dramatically with COVID. I used to phone them up or pop into the planning department. I would always try to actually go in and try to meet someone face to face, but you can't do that now. I write them a nice, concise email. This is what I want to do. This is why. Is this something you're interested in? I mean, one of the things that there's been a lot of discussion about on LinkedIn lately is, do you or don't you do a pre-app? Because that would have been one of the ways to approach them and actually get a dialogue and get to a point where they'll come and do a site visit. If you have a pre-app in place, they are enabled to do these things. But what I've been hearing is that even when people have it in writing that they will approve, they like what they're suggesting through a pre-app, they will then turn it down anyway. So it seems a bit of a pointless waste of time. You may as well put in an application for outline, because the cost isn't that much different, well, depending on the size of what you're wanting to do. And listed buildings is a different kettle of fish as well. But I would tend to start with an architect that I know from the planning portal they like, they use, they work with, because they generally already have an established relationship. And if the architect introduces you to the planner as a sensible person, then you're starting from a good point. If you go in cold, they get so many phone calls, and you have to find a way to make sure that you're memorable. So if you do get them on the phone.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You have to be, they've got to remember that you were who you are, what you're trying to do, and make an impression. And that's probably a little bit regarding the last one. So you've identified that who you need to speak to. At what point, and obviously let me ask this way: how important is the site visit? So you've done all your back and forwards, and now the process has moved to a site visit. So how critical and how important is the site visit to the overall application?
I think, again, that depends. One of the things I'm very shy of is I've had investors in projects want to be there, want to help, and I've had them try to phone the planners and all sorts because they think they can help. One of the things you need to be certain of is that you control all of the people around you and the team so that they don't overface your planning officer. So if you get your planning officer out, make sure that the only people who are there are relevant. So you and your architect, for example.
Yeah.
And
so just on that point, sorry, let me just jump in very quick on that point. There's a couple of questions that are very relevant to exactly where you are there now. So should we put the planning application in on our own, or would you use planning agents? So would you always get an agent involved in that? And how do you find those good agents? So as we were talking about your team's obviously critical. So question one, would you do on your own? I suppose you're different because you're experienced, but someone who wasn't experienced should do it on their own.
I wasn't when I started, and I generally did it with my architect. But if it's permitted development, for example, do it on your own, but just make sure that you've researched to know exactly what you need to do. It is a difficult one. The way I find the right person, as I said a minute ago, is you look at the planning portal at who is the most successful architect, and whose applications get the least kickback. So if it's gone to public consultation, it's gone to committee and all of that sort of thing, generally you can tell by the comments and the problems with it whether the person who submitted it has done a good job or not. And that's how I find architects. I've also networking and various other things. I've found some very good ones, but I've also had an architect in the past who was on Cowboy Builders. He gave me one set of drawings and the planner's a different one. So I got hauled in by planning enforcement saying, why have you built this? Well, these are the drawings the architect gave me. Well, these are the drawings he gave us. So
yeah, so yeah, you're gonna have that. Okay, so
yeah.
I assume that John is still obviously tied up on his urgent call. I know he would have had some really good points to bring in here and further questions to ask you. But let's finish on relationships. So you're out on the site visit. What do you do on site visits? And you gave me a couple of examples actually earlier on this morning. We were talking about what you did last week. So what are some of your tips for site meetings?
Well, the one tip is never, ever, ever put them in a bad position where they are twitchy that you're trying to do something illegal behind the doors, whatever. Never, ever do that, because that's the fastest way to completely lose their respect instantly. Now, I thought it was a really hot day. I took a few bottles of water. Halfway through the meeting, I went and fetched them thinking we could really do with these. And only to be told, well, I don't generally use plastic anymore. I thought, oh, didn't see that one coming.
Yeah.
But everybody was grateful for the water. So be thoughtful, but be very careful, because they are so overwhelmed by public scrutiny and their own practices that they have to follow, and some of the slap wristies that go around, that they have to be hyper vigilant that they are doing their job to the letter, which is also part of what I'm saying about the research. Make sure that what you are enabling them to do their job, because the more you enable them, the easier it is.
Yeah, so, that's a really good point. Really good point. So so last point on relationships, then we'll wrap up. Obviously in theory, relationships in some ways shouldn't matter, because it's the information in front of them. They've got their policies, they've got the town plan, etc. But in your experience, does having a good relationship help the application, or are most planners pretty sort of set emotion aside, relationship aside, and make a decision just on the facts in front of them? Or is there a grey area?
I think there is a grey area. If you're looking at a site like mine with a checkered history of planning, then a relationship is very important, because they need to trust that they're not going to have something horrendous sent their way, or a massive amount of public anger would be the best way to put it. Because if they see that in the very beginning, because it's one of those not so good histories on your project, then you do need to build a trusting relationship with the planners for them to even look at it properly, because they'll be so sick and tired of everything that's gone before that you have to make sure they know it's fresh blood, it's going to be done right. If it's a small extension in a street where you're doing the same as all the other houses in the street have done, then no, you don't need to worry about building a relationship with the planning officer. Bung it in and job done. But if it is something slightly wacky, something slightly different, or again, where you're dealing with a need rather than a want, it is important that you try to build a relationship with the planning officer. But it may be that you don't do it, you let the architect do it, or the planning consultant do it, because that's already done and dusted. You may as well use it.
Yeah, no, absolutely fantastic. So the takeaways obviously is know your local area in terms of research. Make sure that you know your own project history.
Talk to the neighbours.
That's a good point. Yeah, talk to neighbours and get a feel for what they're probably on the best source of information for, well, property in general. Even buying a buy to let in an estate, knock on neighbours' doors and get a bit of history of the site. So I'm sure it's the same there. And then, of course, just relationships, as you've said, which is absolutely brilliant. So,
and don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help, because this is the whole point of networking. There are loads of us out there who will happily help people if we can. Sometimes it is just a case of asking the right person the right question, and that's it. Your problem solved. And never in the property community, never be afraid of reaching out. This is John Corey's. This is John Corey's message.
Yeah, absolutely. And the next slide, sort of probably unbeknown to you, was exactly that in a way, and that is John and I are available to be reached out to. I know John has a particular interest in planning. He very much enjoys, and was probably a pioneer of doing crowdfunding raises for planning uplift projects, on crowdfunding platforms. So he certainly has a wealth of knowledge on that. And we had one of the few platforms that raise funds for planning uplift. So it's very specialist. It's higher risk than the normal investment in development property, but it does come with potentially high rewards as well. So that's why some people like it as part of their diverse portfolio. So if anyone does want to reach out to John or myself, then you can do that. The details are there on the screen, and we can happily talk to you. So we're going to be on Clubhouse. Susie, if I can get you on between 9 and 11, I don't know what your diary is like, but I'll get an invite over to you. If you can join us at 11, we'll get you up as a moderator, and we can carry on some of the thoughts that we had today. But for anyone else who wants to join us at 11, then please do. I know someone has asked earlier again about the link to Monday night's webinar. So there it is in front of you now. I'll get maybe Josh in the office to send this out to everyone who's on the webinar today. But there's a screen grab. Someone can grab that now or take a picture of your phone, and that will let you register for the project webinar. It'll also be on our social media outlets. So that's the Barnhill project that closes next Tuesday at 5 p.m. And there's a project webinar at 7 p.m. on the Monday night, which will be the final wrap up and answering questions for potential investors. So with that, Susie, thank you once again for joining us. I know that I think it was on Monday we had a couple of quick exchanges about today, and you were in your wonderful open air office on a beach somewhere.
Yeah, that's the one.
That was a nice office scene looking out over the ocean.
It's very rare for me, but every so often you do just need to go and reset the batteries.
Absolutely, no, 100%. So listen, thank you for today, and with that we'll sign off. Thank everyone for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you again next Thursday. So join us again, where we do a quick 30-minute overview on the property market and talk to a special guest. So next week will be an interesting guest. We're just firming it up to make sure that it works in the diaries. So keep an eye out for the weekly update, and you'll find out who the guest is next week. So all the best, everyone. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye now.